Chapter 1: Amelia's Discovery. In the outskirts of the small village of St. Michael of the Pines, where mountains rose like ancient guardians and trees whispered secrets that no one seemed to hear, lived a peculiar girl named Amelia Ramirez. She wasn't peculiar in her appearance. With her braided black hair and curious hazel eyes, she looked like any other 8-year-old girl, but rather in the way strange things tended to happen around her, especially when she was near the forest. The Ramirez house was a modest adobe construction painted in a cheerful yellow that stood out amongst the other village houses like a sunflower in a wheat field. In the small back garden, her mother, Mrs. Carmen, grew the most effective medicinal herbs in the region, though no one could explain why the plants seemed to grow better under Amelia's care. That autumn morning began like any other, or at least so it seemed. The sun had barely peeked from behind the mountains, painting the sky with strokes of pink and gold, when Amelia awoke to the familiar crowing of cockerels and her mother's soft humming in the kitchen. She quickly dressed in her favorite frock, a simple blue dress with small embroidered flowers that her grandmother had sewn before departing to the other world, saying it had a bit of magic in every stitch. "Good morning, Mum," Amelia greeted, hugging Mrs. Carmen around the waist as she prepared tortillas on the griddle. "Good morning, my child," her mother replied, noticing a special gleam in her daughter's eyes. "It seems you've had pleasant dreams." "I dreamt of the forest again, Mum," said Amelia, sitting at the worn wooden table. There were lights between the trees, like dancing stars, and I could hear music in the leaves, as if the wind were playing a secret song. Mrs. Carmen exchanged a meaningful look with the grandmother's portrait hanging on the wall. "You have your grandmother's vivid imagination, my love." She too saw magic in the most ordinary things. As they breakfasted on refried beans with freshly made tortillas, Mrs. Carmen gazed thoughtfully at the forest through the window. The tree leaves seemed to shine in a peculiar way this morning, though perhaps it was just the sun playing amongst the branches. "Amelia," she finally said, "I need you to do me a special favor today. Could you go to the forest to gather some mushrooms? I need them for tonight's stew." Amelia's eyes lit up like fireflies in the dark. Her excursions to the forest were always her favorite adventures, though she normally went accompanied by her mother or her father, Mr. Miguel, who worked as a carpenter in the village and swore that the trees spoke to him when he was looking for the best wood. "May I go alone?" Amelia asked, barely containing her excitement. The words left her mouth before she could think them through, and for a moment she feared her mother would refuse. Mrs. Carmen hesitated, biting her lower lip as she always did when worried. "I don't know, Amelia. The forest can be deceptive, and things aren't always what they seem in there. Please, Mum," Amelia pleaded, clasping her hands together. "I know how to identify all the mushrooms you've taught me. I know the path like the back of my hand, and I promise not to stray from it." After what seemed like an eternity, Mrs. Carmen slowly nodded. "All right," she said, though her voice betrayed her concern. "But promise me you'll be careful. There are things in that forest that—" She stopped, as if she had been about to reveal a secret. "Just stay on the path, will you?" "I promise," exclaimed Amelia, hugging her mother so tightly she nearly made her spill her coffee. Minutes later, Amelia left the house with a wicker basket in one hand and a small knife for cutting mushrooms in the other. The fresh morning air caressed her face as she walked towards the forest, her bare feet feeling the damp earth beneath them. For some reason, she had always preferred walking barefoot when going to the forest. She felt she could better hear the earth that way, though she had never tried to explain that sensation to anyone. Upon entering the forest, she was greeted by a symphony of sounds as familiar to her as her own breathing. The birdsong that seemed to welcome her, the crunching of leaves under her feet that sounded like secret whispers, the murmur of the nearby stream that seemed to tell ancient stories. Sunbeams filtered through the leaves, creating a mosaic of light and shadow on the ground that seemed to move with a life of its own. As she followed the familiar path, Amelia began her mushroom hunt. She found some wild mushrooms near the base of an old oak that had always seemed especially wise to her, with its wrinkled bark like an elderly person's face. Carefully, she cut them and placed them in her basket, silently thanking the tree, as her grandmother had taught her. As she ventured deeper into the forest, she began to notice subtle changes in the environment. The birdsong became more melodious, almost as if they were singing a song she could almost understand. The wind in the leaves sounded different, more like whispering voices than mere noise. Even the light seemed to change, becoming more golden and thick, like liquid honey filtering through the leaves. That's when she saw it. Partially hidden behind a wild blackberry bush, there was a mushroom unlike any she had ever seen before. It was a brilliant sky blue color that seemed to pulse with its own light, as if a star had fallen from the sky and taken root in the forest floor. Momentarily forgetting her mother's warnings, Amelia strayed from the path, drawn to the glowing mushroom like a moth to a flame. She knelt before it, fascinated by its supernatural beauty. The air around her seemed to vibrate with a strange energy, and for a moment she thought she heard a distant melody, like wind chimes in the breeze. Without thinking twice, she reached out to touch it. "Oh my," she exclaimed when, as her fingers brushed the mushroom, it vanished into a cloud of shimmering dust that rose into the air like tiny dancing stars before being carried away by a breeze that appeared from nowhere. Suddenly, the forest around her began to transform in a way that made Amelia hold her breath. The colors intensified as if someone had adjusted the brightness of the world. The greens became deeper, the browns richer, and every wildflower seemed to glow with its own light. The shadows deepened, but not threateningly, rather, as if they held wonderful secrets waiting to be discovered. The wildflowers she had barely noticed before now seemed to come alive, roses that changed color with each blink, as if they couldn't decide on a single shade, daisies whose petals appeared to be made of delicate crystal that tinkled in the breeze, violets that emitted a soft purple glow in the shadows. The trees, which before had seemed simply trees, though always special, now moved in a way that had nothing to do with the wind. Their bark rippled gently, as if breathing, and Amelia could swear she saw faces forming and fading within them, as if forest spirits were peering out to observe her. "What's happening?" whispered Amelia, slowly turning around, marveling at the transformation occurring before her eyes. Her voice sounded different in this new forest, as if each word carried an echo of something ancient and magical. That's when she saw her, and this time she was certain it wasn't her imagination. Floating before her, no larger than her outstretched hand, was a creature that could only be a fairy. Her wings were like translucent flower petals that shimmered with all the colors of the rainbow when they moved. Her skin emitted a soft glow, as if made of condensed moonlight, and her hair, the color of autumn leaves, moved as if underwater. The tiny creature looked at Amelia with curiosity, her eyes large and luminous like miniature stars. To Amelia's surprise, the fairy smiled, revealing tiny, perfect teeth that gleamed like diminutive pearls. "Welcome to the true Whispering Woods, Amelia," said the fairy in a voice that sounded like crystal wind chimes. "We've been waiting for you for a very long time." Amelia blinked several times, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing and hearing. "You've been waiting for me. But, who are you? And how do you know my name?" The fairy laughed, a sound reminiscent of crystals tinkling in a soft summer breeze. "We are the guardians of this forest, the protectors of its secrets and magic. I am Light, a morning dew fairy. And as for how I know your name..." She paused, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "The forest has its own mysteries, little one. Some of which you'll soon begin to understand." Amelia looked around with new eyes and noticed for the first time that they weren't alone. Among the shadows and dancing light, she could see more creatures watching her. Small gnomes with hats made of leaves and moss beards peeked out from behind rocks, their eyes bright and curious. Squirrels with tails that seemed made of fire jumped from branch to branch, leaving trails of light in their wake. In the distance, a magnificent stag watched her, its antlers gleaming as if made of crystallized moonlight. But this can't be real," mumbled Amelia, pinching her arm to ensure she wasn't dreaming. The pinch hurt, but the magical world around her didn't disappear. Light moved closer, her soft glow illuminating Amelia's astonished face. "It's as real as the beating of your heart, little one. You've been chosen to see our world because you have something special, a pure heart that can still see the magic most adults have forgotten, and a natural connection to the earth that's becoming increasingly rare in your world." "Chosen? For what?" asked Amelia, her voice a mixture of fear and contained excitement. "To be a bridge between our worlds," Light replied, her expression becoming more serious. "To learn the secrets of the forest and help protect it. The Whispering Woods has existed in harmony with your world for centuries, but now faces dangers that threaten its existence. We need your help, Amelia." Amelia looked at the basket of mushrooms she had dropped in her surprise, then at Light and the magical creatures surrounding her. Her mind told her she should be frightened, that she should run back home and forget all this. But her heart sang with a joy she had never felt before, as if she had finally found something she had always been searching for without knowing it. "What do I need to do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, but firm and determined. Light smiled, a flash of hope gleaming in her eyes like shooting stars. "First, you must learn. Come with me, Amelia. There's much you need to see and understand." And so, with her heart beating like an excited bird in her chest and her mind full of unanswered questions, Amelia took her first conscious step into a world of magic and wonders, a world that had always been there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone with a heart pure enough and a mind open enough to see it. What Amelia didn't know at that moment, as she followed Light deeper into the enchanted forest, was that this discovery would not only change her life forever but would place her at the center of a battle for the future of the Whispering Woods and the delicate balance between the magical world and the world she had always known. Chapter 2: The Forest Guardians. The afternoon sun filtered through ancient leaves, creating a display of light that transformed the forest floor into a living kaleidoscope of greens and golds. Amelia, her heart beating as fast as a hummingbird's wings, followed Light along a path that seemed to have a life of its own, appearing and vanishing with each step they took, as if the forest itself was guiding their way. The air around her vibrated with an energy she had never felt before, and each breath brought new and mysterious aromas. Flowers that appeared in no botany book, spices that didn't grow in her mother's garden, and something else, something ancient and magical that made her skin tingle with anticipation. "Where exactly are we going?" asked Amelia, ducking under a low branch covered in moss that glowed as if it had stars trapped within it. Her bare feet felt the earth more alive than ever, as if each step connected with the very heartbeat of the forest itself. Light fluttered near her ear, leaving a trail of sparkling dust that vanished in the air like tiny fireworks. "To the Whispering Clearing," replied the fairy, her musical voice blending with the sounds of the forest. "It's the very heart of this place, where all the guardians gather to maintain the forest's balance." As they advanced, Amelia noticed more and more signs that this wasn't the forest she had known all her life. Squirrels with tails that glowed like fireflies danced between the branches, leaving trails of light in their wake. Birds with impossible plumage, changing color according to the light that touched them, sang melodies that seemed to tell ancient stories. In the distance, she thought she saw a majestic stag whose antlers appeared carved from pure crystal, reflecting sunlight in 1,000 different directions. Suddenly, the path widened, and Amelia found herself holding her breath at the sight that unfolded before her. The Whispering Clearing was a perfect circular space, surrounded by the oldest trees she had ever seen. Their trunks, thick as church towers, rose towards the sky, forming a natural cathedral, their canopies intertwining so high that they barely let through rays of light that danced like golden columns in the air. In the center of the clearing, a huge flat stone rose from the ground as if it had grown there naturally. Its surface was covered with symbols that glowed with their own light, changing and moving as if they were alive, telling stories in a language that Amelia felt she could almost understand. Around the stone were gathered the most amazing creatures Amelia had ever imagined, not even in her most fantastic dreams. Gnomes with hats woven from living leaves and beards made of glowing moss watched her with ancient and wise eyes. Fairies of all sizes and colors fluttered in the air, their wings creating tiny rainbows with each movement. Animals that seemed to have stepped out of the most fantastic tales mingled with creatures that defied all description. An expectant silence fell over the clearing when Amelia and Light entered. All eyes turned to her, but instead of feeling intimidated, Amelia felt a strange sense of belonging, as if she had finally found a place where she fit perfectly. A majestic owl, with feathers that seemed woven from threads of gold and silver, descended silently from a high branch and perched near her. Its eyes, deep and wise as wells of ancient knowledge, looked at her intently. When it spoke, its voice was deep and resonant, like an echo in an ancient cave. "Welcome, Amelia Ramirez," said the owl, slightly inclining its head. "I am Nocturne, guardian of the forest's wisdom and keeper of its most ancient secrets. We have been waiting for you." Amelia made a small curtsy, instinctively remembering her grandmother's stories about how to greet magical beings. "Pleased to meet you, Sir Nocturne," she said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. "Why were you waiting for me?" Before the owl could answer, a movement to her left caught her attention. A gnome with a long green beard that seemed made of living vines stepped forward. His skin had the texture of ancient tree bark, and when he walked, it sounded like leaves crunching underfoot. "I am Root," said the gnome, his voice deep and rough as the earth itself. "Guardian of the earth and all that grows in it. You are here, little one, because the forest itself has chosen you. We have observed how plants thrive under your touch, how trees lean towards you when you pass, how the earth itself sings when you walk barefoot upon it." Amelia felt her cheeks flush. She had always noticed these things but had assumed it was normal, that everyone could feel life pulsing in the earth and plants as she did. A fluid movement drew her gaze to the small stream that crossed the clearing. The water seemed to come alive, rising and taking the form of a woman of extraordinary beauty. Her body, made entirely of crystal-clear water, sparkled with all the colors of the rainbow when light passed through it, and her voice sounded like the murmur of 1,000 streams. "I am Current," said the water woman, her form gently undulating. "Guardian of all waters that flow in the forest. The world desperately needs a protector, Amelia. Someone who can see the magic that still exists in nature and help others remember its importance. Humans have forgotten the ancient connection with the earth, and that forgetting is causing more harm than you can imagine." Amelia looked around, overwhelmed by the responsibility these words implied. "But, why me? I'm just a child. What can I do that's so important?" Light, who had been floating silently beside her, gently landed on her shoulder. Her tiny hand, warm as a sunbeam, touched Amelia's cheek. "Because you have something special, something that has become very rare in your world, a pure heart that can still see magic in the simplest things, and a natural connection to the earth that most humans have lost. You are the perfect bridge between our worlds." Nocturne spread his wings, and the movement seemed to make the shadows in the clearing dance. "However," he said in a solemn voice, "this responsibility is not something to be taken lightly. Being a forest guardian requires dedication, courage, and wisdom. You will have to learn many secrets and face challenges that will test your spirit. Are you willing to accept this path?" Amelia felt a tingle of excitement and fear in her stomach. She knew, with the certainty that only a young heart can have, that her life would never be the same after this moment. But she also felt, deep within her being, that this was right, that this was the destiny she had been born for. With determination shining in her eyes, she lifted her head and responded, "Yes, I'm ready. I want to learn. I want to protect the forest and everything that lives in it." A collective smile seemed to illuminate the clearing. Root extended his gnarled hand towards her, and from his palm sprouted a small flower that Amelia had never seen before, with petals that glowed like miniature stars. "Then," said the gnome, as the flower floated towards Amelia, "let your training begin, young guardian. The Whispering Woods welcomes you as its new apprentice and protector." And so, under the golden light of dusk filtering through ancient branches, surrounded by magical creatures and with a glowing flower in her hands, Amelia took the first step on her new path. She didn't know exactly what the future held, what adventures and dangers awaited her in this magical world she had just discovered, but she was ready to face them all. What none of those present could know at that moment was that this day would mark the beginning of one of the most extraordinary periods in the history of the Whispering Woods, and that the small girl standing before them would become one of the most important guardians the forest had ever known. Chapter 3: The Test of the Ancestral Tree. The years passed like leaves carried by the autumn wind, and with them, Amelia blossomed. Now, at 15, she had grown not only in height but also in wisdom. Her childhood braids had given way to long black hair that rippled like forest shadows at dusk, and her hazel eyes shone with the knowledge of nature's secrets that she had learned on her path as a forest apprentice. That morning, Amelia found herself in the Whispering Clearing, surrounded by the guardians who had been her mentors and friends. The air was filled with vibrant expectation, as if the forest itself held its breath. Nocturne, the wise owl, watched her from a nearby branch, his golden eyes reflecting the dawn light with an intensity that seemed to see beyond the visible. "Amelia," Nocturne began with his deep, resonant voice, "you have learned much in these years. Today you will face your first great test as a protector of the forest." Light, the fairy who had become her closest companion, fluttered nervously around her, leaving a trail of sparkling dust in the air. "Are you ready, Amelia?" she asked with a mixture of excitement and concern. Amelia nodded, though she felt butterflies fluttering in her stomach. It was a familiar feeling, a mixture of fear and excitement that always preceded something important. "I'm ready. What's the test?" Root, the old gnome, stepped forward, his moss beard swaying gently in the morning breeze. "You must reach the heart of the ancestral tree and obtain one of its golden seeds. But be careful, the path is full of illusions and trials that will challenge your spirit." Current, the guardian of waters, emerged from her stream, her watery form shimmering under the sun like a prism of colors. The ancestral tree is the oldest and wisest being in the forest. Only those with a pure heart and a true connection to nature can reach it and claim its treasure. Amelia breathed deeply, letting the fresh air fill her lungs and calm her mind. "I understand. Where should I begin?" Nocturne extended a wing towards the north, pointing to a path that disappeared among the trees. "Follow the path of the blue fireflies. They will guide you to the ancestral tree. But remember, young Amelia, not everything is as it seems in the heart of the forest. Trust your intuition and what you have learned." With a final look at her mentors and friends, Amelia ventured into the deepest and oldest part of the forest. The trees here were gigantic, their trunks so wide that not even 10 people could encircle them with their arms. Sunlight barely penetrated the dense canopy, creating a world of shadows and whispers where magic was so thick she could almost touch it. Following the path of blue fireflies, which glowed like tiny stars in the twilight, Amelia soon found herself in a misty clearing. The air here was different, heavier, charged with history and power. In the center of the clearing stood the ancestral tree, so tall that its crown was lost among the clouds. Its bark glowed with a golden light, and its leaves whispered ancient secrets that seemed to sing an eternal song. But when Amelia took a step towards the tree, the ground beneath her feet began to move. Thick, twisted roots emerged from the earth, forming a living labyrinth that constantly changed, blocking her path and challenging her advance. A test of perseverance, Amelia murmured to herself, remembering Root's lessons about the changing nature of the forest and the importance of patience and determination. With determination, she began to navigate the labyrinth. Each time she thought she had found the right path, the roots would move, closing her way and forcing her to find a new route. But Amelia didn't give up. She closed her eyes, breathed deeply, and connected with the forest's energy, letting her intuition guide her. "I'm not here to conquer you," she whispered to the ancestral tree, feeling a deep reverence for the majesty that surrounded her. "I'm here to learn and protect." As if it had heard her sincere words, the root labyrinth calmed. A clear path opened before her, leading directly to the great tree's trunk. Amelia advanced carefully, her heart beating strongly, and stopped before a small cavity in the bark. There, glowing with a warm, golden light, lay a seed. Amelia took it with reverence, feeling its warmth and the power it contained, as if she held the very heart of the forest in her hands. Suddenly, an ancient and powerful voice resonated in her mind, filling the clearing with its presence. "You have passed the test, young protector. The seed is yours, but remember, with great power comes great responsibility. The forest's future depends on you." When Amelia returned to the whispering clearing, the guardians welcomed her with joy and pride, their faces illuminated by the light of the golden seed. But while they celebrated her success, none of them noticed the dark shadow moving at the forest's edge, watching with eyes full of greed and evil. The test had ended, but the true challenge was just beginning. Amelia, with the golden seed in her hand, knew that her journey was far from over, and that the fate of the Whispering Woods, and perhaps of the entire world, now depended on her. Chapter 4: The Stranger in the Village. The afternoon sun bathed the small village of St. Michael of the Pines in golden light, tinting the adobe houses in warm hues and casting long shadows on the cobblestone streets. Amelia, now 18, walked these familiar streets, carrying a basket full of medicinal herbs she had collected in the forest. Her long black hair, braided with wildflowers, swayed gently in the breeze, and her hazel eyes, which had seen more wonders than most people could imagine, shone with a mixture of wisdom and youth. Despite her connection to the magical world of the Whispering Woods, Amelia had kept her secret well guarded from the village inhabitants, who saw her simply as the daughter of the local healer, Mrs. Carmen. To them, Amelia was a kind and somewhat dreamy young woman, known for her ability to find the rarest and most effective herbs for her mother's remedies. As she headed towards the central square, Amelia noticed an unusual commotion. A group of people had gathered around something, or someone, their voices raised with a mixture of excitement and curiosity. Intrigued, she approached, adjusting the basket on her arm. "Amelia, come and see," called her friend Sophia, a girl her age with brown curls and freckles that danced on her nose when she smiled. "There's a stranger in the village, and he's gorgeous." Amelia made her way through the crowd, her curiosity growing with each step. In all her years in St. Michael of the Pines, they had rarely had visitors, much less someone who caused such a stir. When she finally reached the center of the group, she found herself face to face with a young man who appeared to be about 20. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a posture that spoke of confidence and perhaps a touch of arrogance. His hair was black as a raven's wing, styled back in a way that seemed casual yet studied. But what caught Amelia's attention most were his eyes, a green so intense they seemed to glow with their own light, like forest leaves bathed in morning dew. The young man wore elegant clothes that clearly marked him as someone from the city, an immaculate white shirt, finely cut trousers, and leather boots that gleamed under the afternoon sun. In his hand, he held a wide-brimmed hat, which he removed and replaced with a gesture that seemed practiced to make an impression. When his eyes fell on Amelia, the young man seemed to lose his breath for a moment. The crowd around them seemed to vanish, and for an instant, only they existed. Amelia felt a strange sensation in her stomach, as if thousands of butterflies had taken flight at once. It was a new sensation for her, different from anything she had experienced in the magical world of the forest. "Hello," said the young man with a soft, melodious voice that made more than one village girl sigh. "My name is Diego. I've just arrived in the village and was wondering if someone could show me around." Before Amelia could respond, Sophia pushed her forward, her eyes shining with excitement. "Amelia can. She knows every corner of this place and the forest. There's no one better to show you St. Michael of the Pines." Diego smiled, and Amelia felt her heart quicken. "It would be my pleasure," he said, not taking his eyes off her. Amelia nodded, a bit dazed by the intensity of Diego's gaze and the sudden attention from the entire village. "Of course, I can show you the village," she said, trying to maintain her composure. "Where would you like to start?" Diego offered his arm with a gallant gesture. "Wherever you think best, beautiful guide. I'm in your hands." As they began their tour of the village, followed by curious glances and excited whispers from the inhabitants, Amelia couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and apprehension. There was something about Diego that intrigued her, but also put her on alert. Perhaps it was years of dealing with the forest's magical creatures, but her instinct told her there was more to this stranger than met the eye. They walked along the cobblestone streets, with Amelia pointing out places of interest. The old church with its bell tower reaching towards the sky, the central square with its stone fountain where village women gathered to chat in the afternoons, the small school where children learned under the tutelage of the stern but kind teacher Rosario. Diego listened attentively, asking intelligent questions and showing genuine interest in the village's history and customs. But Amelia noticed that his eyes often strayed towards the forest that stretched beyond the last houses, a look of curiosity and something else, longing, perhaps? "Tell me, Diego," Amelia asked as they passed old Don Joaquin's shop, "what specifically brings you to St. Michael of the Pines? It's not exactly a common tourist destination." Diego paused for a moment, looking towards the forest rising in the distance, its ancient trees casting long shadows in the twilight. "I've heard stories, legends about this forest," he said in a voice that suddenly seemed distant, almost dreamy. "They say there are plants here that can't be found anywhere else in the world. Plants with unique properties." Amelia felt a shiver run down her spine. Diego's words were innocent, but there was something in his tone, in the intensity of his gaze, that put her on alert. Did Diego know something about the magical world hidden in the forest? "They're just old wives' tales," Amelia said, trying to sound unconcerned. "The forest is beautiful, but there's nothing special about it. Just trees, flowers, and perhaps the occasional mischievous rabbit." Diego looked at her in a way that made her feel as if he could see through her, as if he could read the secrets she guarded so jealously. Are you sure? It seems to me you know this forest very well. Before Amelia could respond, a sharp cry broke the air. It came from the forest. Help! Screamed a child's voice, full of panic. My little brother is trapped. Without thinking twice, Amelia dropped her basket of herbs and ran towards the forest. Her protector instincts activated instantly, forgetting for a moment her conversation with Diego and the suspicions he had awakened in her. To her surprise, Diego followed close behind, his long legs keeping pace with her easily. Wait, he shouted. I'm coming with you. As they ventured among the trees, the twilight light filtered through the leaves, creating a play of light and shadow that seemed to change the forest itself. Amelia could feel the magic pulsing around her, responding to her presence and her urgency. She prayed silently that she wouldn't have to reveal her secrets in front of this stranger who, despite his charm, gave her a feeling of unease she couldn't explain. But if a child's life was in danger, she knew she would do whatever was necessary, regardless of the consequences. What neither of them knew was that this incident would mark the beginning of a series of events that would test not only Amelia's ability as protector of the forest, but also her heart and everything she thought she knew about her world and her place in it. Chapter 5: Secrets in the Shadows. The forest seemed to hold its breath as Amelia and Diego ventured deeper into its thickness. Shadows lengthened under the afternoon sun, and the air vibrated with an almost palpable tension. The cries for help echoed among the ancient trees, guiding them towards a small ravine covered in vines that seemed to move of their own accord, though Amelia knew she had to keep that observation to herself. This way, shouted Amelia, jumping with the grace of one who knows every root and stone along the path. Her feet moved with a certainty born of years of secrets shared with the forest, dodging low branches and navigating obstacles almost instinctively. Diego followed closely, and Amelia couldn't help but notice that his agility seemed too natural for someone supposedly new to these paths. They reached the edge of the ravine where they found a girl of about 8, her dress stained with dirt and her cheeks streaked with tears. My little brother, she sobbed, pointing downward. He's trapped down there. Amelia peered cautiously over the edge, and her heart skipped a beat. A small boy of no more than 5 was desperately clinging to a root protruding from the rocky wall, his tiny fingers white from the strength of his grip. The child sobbed silently, fear reflected in his large, frightened eyes. Stay calm, little one, said Amelia in a soft voice, trying to convey a calmness she didn't entirely feel. We're going to get you out of there. She could feel the forest's magic pulsing around her, eager to help, but Diego's presence complicated everything. Diego removed his jacket with a fluid movement that reminded one of a predator preparing to pounce. I can climb down with a rope, he proposed, his green eyes shining with an unsettling intensity. Do you have anything we could use? Amelia looked around, desperation fighting against the need to maintain her secret. The golden seed at her neck pulsed urgently, as if knowing it was needed. An idea crossed her mind, risky but necessary. Diego, she said, turning to him with an intense look, I need you to go to the village and bring help. I'll stay here with the children. Diego frowned, a shadow of suspicion crossing his face. I can't leave you alone. It's dangerous. His voice sounded concerned, but there was something else in it, something Amelia couldn't decipher. Trust me, Amelia insisted, looking directly into his eyes and putting all the conviction she could into her voice. I know this forest better than anyone. We'll be fine until you return with help. After a moment of tension that seemed eternal, Diego nodded and ran off towards the village. As soon as his footsteps were lost in the distance, Amelia turned to the ravine. Light, she whispered urgently, and the air sparkled as the tiny fairy appeared, her light pulsing with concern. We need to rescue that child. Can you create a network of vines? With a movement of her tiny hands, Light directed the forest's magic. The vines came to life, interweaving into a secure net that gently wrapped around the boy and lifted him into Amelia's arms. Thank you, exclaimed the little one, hugging her tightly, his body trembling with fear and relief. The sound of approaching footsteps made Amelia's heart jump. With a quick gesture, she indicated to Light to hide just as Diego emerged from among the trees, his breathing agitated but controlled, as if he had run less than he should have. Amelia, he exclaimed, but stopped short upon seeing the child safe. I found. Wait, how? His eyes scanned the scene, searching for an explanation that Amelia couldn't give him. He managed to climb up by himself, she lied, avoiding his scrutinizing gaze. He was very brave. The arrival of villagers with ropes and lanterns interrupted the moment, allowing Amelia to slip away amid the confusion and joy of the rescue. But she could feel Diego's gaze following her, penetrating like an arrow. That night, while the village celebrated, Amelia slipped silently towards the whispering clearing. The full moon bathed the forest in silver light that made everything seem both more magical and more dangerous. Something isn't right, she confessed to Nocturne and Root, her voice barely a whisper in the night. That boy, Diego. There's something about him that unsettles me. I think he suspects something about the forest. Nocturne ruffled his wings with concern, creating ripples in the night shadows. We must be cautious, young Amelia. Not all who seek the forest's magic have good intentions. Some covet it for power, others for greed. But we cannot judge him without knowing his motives, added Root, his voice sounding like dry leaves in the wind. Observe and learn. Sometimes, the most important secrets are revealed in the silence between words. Amelia nodded, but as she returned home under the blanket of stars, she couldn't shake the feeling that something momentous was about to happen. What she didn't know was that a dark figure watched her from the shadows, green eyes shining with a mixture of curiosity and determination that presaged events that would forever change the fate of the Whispering Woods and all who kept its secrets. Chapter 6: The Dance of the Fireflies. Summer had arrived in St. Michael of the Pines, bringing with it warm nights and starlit skies that seemed to stretch into infinity. The village bustled with activity as it prepared for its most important annual festivity, the Dance of the Fireflies, a celebration marking the summer solstice and, unbeknownst to most, coinciding with one of the moments of greatest magical power in the Whispering Woods. Amelia, now with the weight of her secrets and responsibilities weighing more heavily than ever on her shoulders, was helping to decorate the village square. Garlands of wildflowers and paper lanterns hung between the trees, creating a magical atmosphere even without the help of the forest beings. The air was filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread and the sweet perfume of jasmine flowers growing in house courtyards. While hanging a particularly beautiful garland, made with flowers she had gathered that very morning at the forest's edge, Amelia felt a presence behind her. She turned to find herself face to face with Diego, who smiled at her with that mixture of charm and mystery she had come to know in recent weeks. "Hello, Amelia," he said, helping her secure the garland in place. Their fingers brushed for a moment, and Amelia felt a spark of electricity that had nothing to do with forest magic. "The village looks beautiful. Almost magical." Amelia felt her heart quicken, both from Diego's proximity and the insinuation in his words. "Thank you," she replied, trying to maintain her composure and a casual smile on her face. "It's a very old tradition." Diego moved a bit closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "You know, I've been researching local legends. They say that on nights like this, the barrier between our world and the magical world becomes thinner." Amelia felt a shiver run down her spine. The precision of Diego's words was unsettling. "They're just stories, Diego. None of that is real." He looked at her intently, his green eyes shining with intensity. "Are you sure? Because since I arrived here, I've seen things I can't explain. And you always seem to be at the center of it all." Before Amelia could respond, Sophia appeared running, her brown curls bouncing with each step. "Amelia, we need your help with the dresses for the dance." Grateful for the interruption, Amelia quickly excused herself and followed her friend, feeling Diego's gaze fixed on her back. Her mind was spinning, divided between excitement for the festivity and growing concern about Diego's suspicions. The hours passed in a whirlwind of preparations, laughter, and anticipation. Finally, as the sun began to sink into the horizon, painting the sky in golden and rosy hues, the dance of the fireflies began. The village square had transformed into a dreamlike place. Hundreds of lanterns hung from trees and between houses, their soft light mingling with the glow of the first stars. Music filled the air, a mixture of traditional melodies played on guitars, violins, and the pulsing sound of drums that seemed to echo in the very heart of the nearby forest. Amelia emerged from her house, dressed in a beautiful blue dress that seemed to capture starlight. The fabric flowed around her like spring water, and small white flowers adorned her loose hair. At her neck, hidden beneath her dress, the pouch with the golden seed pulsed gently, as if knowing this night was special. As she moved through the crowd, greeting friends and neighbors, Amelia couldn't help feeling divided. On one hand, the joy of celebration enveloped her, bringing memories of past summers and the feeling of belonging to her community. On the other, her mind was alert, aware that on nights like this, the forest's magic was closer to the surface, more likely to manifest in ways that the uninitiated might notice. Suddenly, the music changed to a slow, romantic melody. Amelia felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to find Diego. He looked impressive in a white shirt and dark trousers, his black hair combed back revealing his strong features. "May I have this dance?" he asked, extending his hand to her with a smile that made Amelia's heart skip a beat. She hesitated for a moment, aware of the risks, but something in Diego's eyes made her accept. As they moved to the rhythm of the music, the world around them seemed to fade away. There were only the two of them, spinning beneath the stars and the soft lantern light. "Amelia," Diego whispered, drawing her closer, his voice barely audible above the music, "I know you're keeping a secret. And I think it has to do with the forest." Amelia's heart leapt. She wanted to deny it, maintain the facade she had built over years, but something in Diego's gaze stopped her. There was a sincerity, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "Diego, she began, not really knowing what to say. But before she could continue, a cry of amazement rose from the crowd, interrupting the moment. Amelia turned, alarmed, and saw something that made her blood freeze. Hundreds of fireflies had emerged from the forest and were now dancing above the square, forming impossible patterns in the air. "Look!" someone shouted. "They're making shapes." Indeed, the fireflies moved with supernatural precision, creating images of magical creatures, fairies, gnomes, and fantastic animals. The crowd watched open-mouthed, both amazed and frightened. Amelia knew this wasn't normal. The forest beings had never revealed themselves like this. Something was terribly wrong. She could feel the magic in the air, thick and palpable, as if the veil between worlds was tearing. Amidst the commotion, she felt someone grab her arm. It was light, invisible to all except her. "Amelia," the tiny fairy whispered urgently, her voice barely audible above the amazed murmurs of the crowd, "the forest is in danger. We need your help now." Amelia looked at Diego, who was watching the fireflies with a mixture of amazement and recognition. There was no time for explanations or doubts. The fate of the Whispering Woods, and possibly the entire village, hung by a thread. "I'm sorry," she said, pulling away from his embrace with a mixture of regret and determination. "I have to go." Before Diego could stop her, Amelia disappeared into the crowd, running towards the forest. Her blue dress billowed behind her like wings, and the golden seed at her neck pulsed with an urgency that echoed in her racing heart. She didn't notice that Diego was following her closely, his eyes shining with a determination that went beyond mere curiosity. The dance of the fireflies had ended, but the true dance, one between light and darkness, the magical world and the mundane, was just beginning. As Amelia plunged into the darkness of the forest, guided by light and the urgent beating of the golden seed, she knew this night would change everything. The secrets she had kept for so long were about to come to light, and the consequences could be greater than she had ever imagined. Chapter 7: The Battle for the Heart of the Forest. Night loomed over the Whispering Woods like a black velvet cloak, but this time there was no peace in the darkness. The air vibrated with an unsettling energy, as if the earth itself held its breath before what was to come. Amelia ran among the ancient trees, guided by light and the urgent beating of the golden seed she wore around her neck. Her blue dress, once elegant and ethereal, was now torn by low branches, leaving shreds of fabric that glinted like fallen stars in the forest's twilight. "What's happening, Light?" Amelia panted as she jumped over twisted roots and dodged branches that seemed to try to stop her. The forest around her seemed wilder than ever, as if responding to an invisible threat. The tiny fairy flew close to her ear, her light flickering with anxiety. "Someone has penetrated the heart of the forest, Amelia. They're trying to steal the mother seed from the ancestral tree." If they succeed, the entire balance of the forest could collapse. Amelia felt her blood freeze. The mother seed, of which her own golden seed was merely an echo, represented the source of all magic in the Whispering Woods. In the wrong hands, its power could be devastating. Suddenly, a deafening roar shook the air, making tree leaves tremble and flocks of birds take flight in panic. Amelia reached the ancestral tree's clearing and froze at the scene before her. A hooded figure stood before the majestic tree, holding a sphere of blinding light in their hands, the mother seed. Around them, a barrier of dark energy, which seemed to absorb light itself, kept the forest guardians at bay. Nocturne, Root, and Current struggled to break it, but their efforts seemed useless against that unnatural darkness. "Stop!" shouted Amelia, her voice charged with an authority she didn't know she possessed. The figure turned slowly, and when they lowered their hood, Amelia felt the world stop. It was Diego, but his green eyes, once captivating, now shone with an emerald fire that had nothing human about it. "Ah, Amelia," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I knew you would come. You're the final piece of the puzzle." "Diego, why?" Amelia's voice trembled with pain and betrayal. "How could you deceive us like this? Why?" Diego laughed, but it was a cold laugh that sent a shiver down Amelia's spine. "For power, of course. This forest holds secrets that could change the world. And I will control them all." With a wave of his hand, the dark barrier expanded, trapping Amelia in its icy embrace. She fought against the energy that enveloped her, feeling how it drained her strength and magic. "I always knew you were special, Amelia," Diego continued, approaching with deliberate steps. "Your connection to the forest is the key to unlocking all its potential. With your power and this seed, I'll be unstoppable." Amelia closed her eyes, concentrating on the forest energy surrounding her. She could feel it pulsing like a giant heart, calling her, begging her to save it. The golden seed at her neck burned against her skin, resonating with the mother seed's power. "The forest isn't a source of power to be exploited, Diego," said Amelia, opening her eyes with determination. "It's a living being that deserves respect and protection." With a cry that seemed to shake the very foundations of the forest, Amelia released all the energy she had accumulated. The dark barrier shattered like glass, and a wave of pure light expanded through the clearing, pushing back the shadows. The guardians, freed, joined her in a dance of elemental power. Nocturne flew in circles, his wings creating a whirlwind that made the leaves dance. Root made vines sprout from the earth that tried to catch Diego. Current formed a wall of crystalline water that blocked his escape. Diego, surprised by the counterattack, stepped back. For the first time, fear broke through his mask of arrogance. "No. You can't stop me. I've come too far." Amelia advanced, her body shining with the light of 1,000 fireflies. The torn dress billowed around her like mist and moonlight. "This isn't your world, Diego. You have no right to take what doesn't belong to you." With a fluid movement, she extended her hand towards the mother seed. The sphere of light vibrated, recognizing the call of a true guardian, and flew to her, abandoning Diego. "No," he screamed, lunging forward in desperation. But it was too late. Amelia pressed the seed against her chest, and an explosion of golden light flooded the clearing, so bright that for a moment it seemed as if the sun had been born in the middle of the night. When the light faded, Diego had vanished, leaving only a trail of black smoke that dissipated in the night air. Amelia fell to her knees, exhausted but victorious. The guardians gathered around her, their faces mixing relief and concern. "You did it, little one," said Nocturne, his voice charged with emotion. "You've saved the forest and restored the balance." As the night regained its calm and the stars began to shine again over the Whispering Woods, Amelia understood that this victory, though important, was only the beginning. The power she now possessed brought with it an even greater responsibility, and the fate of the forest, more than ever, depended on her. Chapter 8: The Dawn of a New Era. The sun rose over the Whispering Woods, its first rays filtering through the leaves and bathing the ancestral trees clearing in a golden light that seemed almost magical. Amelia, exhausted but with a new determination shining in her eyes, slowly stood up. Her dress, once blue as the night sky, now seemed to have absorbed the very essence of the forest, deep greens interwoven with golden threads that sparkled with every movement, as if she wore the forest's soul upon her skin. The guardians surrounded her, their faces a mixture of pride, amazement, and a new reverence for the young woman who had saved not only the Whispering Woods but possibly the balance between the magical and mundane worlds. "Amelia," Nocturne began, his voice charged with emotion, "what you've achieved tonight goes beyond anything we've seen in centuries. You've proven to be not just a guardian, but the true heir to the forest spirit." Root nodded, his moss beard swaying gently. "With the fusion of the mother seed and the ancestral tree, a new era begins for our world. And you, little one, are at the center of it all." Amelia looked at her hands, still glowing with residual magic she had channeled. She could feel the forest in a new way, as if every leaf, every dewdrop, every creature was an extension of her own being. It was overwhelming and wonderful at the same time. "But what does this mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What happens now?" Current approached, her watery form reflecting the dawn light in 1,000 colors. "It means, young Amelia, that your destiny and the forests are now intertwined more than ever. The barrier between worlds has been strengthened thanks to you, but it has also become more flexible." "Flexible?" Amelia frowned, trying to understand the implications. Light fluttered before her, her tiny face serious but full of hope. "It means you now have the power to be a true bridge between worlds, Amelia. You can help magic and the human world coexist in harmony, without one threatening the other." The magnitude of this responsibility fell upon Amelia like a physical weight. She sat on a root of the ancestral tree, trying to process everything that had happened and what it meant for her future. "But how can I do that?" she asked, looking at the guardians. "All my life I've kept this world secret. How can I be a bridge without revealing the existence of magic to those who might want to exploit it, like Diego?" Nocturne landed softly beside her, his wise eyes fixed on her. "With wisdom and discernment, little one. It's not about revealing everything at once, but gently guiding those with pure hearts towards understanding and respect for nature and its mysteries." Root nodded. "You'll begin slowly. Perhaps teaching the village children to respect the forest, or helping adults rediscover magic in the small things of everyday life. And we'll be with you every step of the way," added Current, her voice like the murmur of a quiet stream. Amelia breathed deeply, feeling determination replace fear in her heart. She stood up, straightening with new confidence. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm. "I'll protect the forest and help build a bridge between our worlds. It's my destiny and my honor." Just then, a soft glow began emanating from the ancestral tree. A small branch, no larger than Amelia's finger, gently detached and floated towards her. When she took it in her hands, she felt a pulse of warm, comforting energy. "The ancestral tree has given you a gift," explained Light with amazement. "A wand made from its own essence. With it, you'll be able to channel the forest's magic even when you're in the human world." Amelia held the wand with reverence, marveling at its beauty and the power she could feel flowing through it. "I'll use it wisely," she promised. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Amelia knew it was time to return to the village. The night of the dance of the Fireflies would have ended, and her absence would surely have been noticed. "I must return," she said, looking at the guardians. "How will I explain?" She looked at herself, aware that her appearance had changed dramatically. Nocturne smiled, a rare gesture on his usually serious face. "The forest's magic will protect you. To uninitiated eyes, you'll appear as always. But remember, Amelia, those with hearts open to magic will be able to see glimpses of your true nature." With a final embrace from Light and a bow to the guardians, Amelia began her journey back to the village. Each step she took seemed lighter, as if the forest itself propelled her forward. When she reached the forest's edge, she paused for a moment, looking towards St. Michael of the Pines. The village was awakening to a new day, unaware that the world had changed forever during the night. But Amelia knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, not just for her, but for both worlds she now bridged. With the wand safely tucked away and the forest's magic flowing through her veins, she stepped out of the shadows and into the morning light, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in her role as guardian of both the magical and mundane worlds. The village looked the same as always, But for Amelia, everything had changed. She took a deep breath and stepped out from the protection of the trees. To her surprise, she found Sophia waiting for her, sitting on a rock near the path. Her friend jumped up when she saw her, eyes wide. "Amelia, where have you been? Everyone's worried and, what happened to you?" Sophia stared at her, blinking as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Amelia realized that Sophia could see, at least partly, her transformation. Her heart filled with hope. If Sophia could see, it meant she had a heart open to magic. "Sophia," said Amelia with a gentle smile, "I have a story to tell you. A story about magic, friendship, and the power of believing in the impossible." As they walked together towards the village, Amelia began to tell her story, carefully but honestly. She watched as Sophia's eyes lit up with wonder and understanding, and knew she had found her first ally in her new mission. The village rose before them, awakening to a new day. A day that marked the beginning of a new era, not just for Amelia and the Whispering Woods, but potentially for the entire world. As Amelia crossed the square, greeting neighbors who looked at her with a mixture of relief and curiosity, she couldn't help but smile. The path ahead would be difficult, full of challenges and complicated decisions. She would have to find a balance between her duty as guardian and her life in the village, between magic and the mundane. But as she felt the comforting weight of the wand in her pocket and saw the look of wonder in Sophia's eyes, Amelia knew she wasn't alone. She had the support of the guardians, the wisdom of the forest, and now, the beginning of a bridge between two worlds. The sun shone brightly over St. Michael of the Pines, as if the sky itself celebrated the dawn of this new era. And in the heart of the Whispering Woods, the ancestral tree pulsed with renewed energy, its roots extending deep into the earth, connecting worlds that were once separate. Amelia's adventure hadn't ended. In fact, it was just beginning. But now, with the forest's power flowing through her and a clear purpose in her heart, she was ready to face any challenge the future might bring. As she walked towards her home, where she knew her parents waited with a mixture of concern and love, Amelia made a silent promise. She promised to honor the gift she had been given, to protect the balance between worlds and, above all, never lose the ability to marvel at the magic that surrounds us every day, if only we have the eyes and heart open to see it. The Whispering Woods had found its guardian, and the world would never be the same. Magic, long forgotten by many, was about to return to the world in subtle but powerful ways. And at the center of it all was Amelia, the girl who had once discovered a magical world by accident and who now stood as the bridge between two realities, ready to write the next chapter in the eternal story of magic and humanity.